Where's Fielder?
He's gone to the dogs.
Gone to the Dogs podcast. Your host, Steve Fielder, here, coming at you one more time through the miracle of Al Gore's internet. I've got a great voice. I've got a terrible voice, but I got a great guest for you to enjoy this week. And, we come at you every week beginning on Monday morning, but once the podcast is online, it's there forever, so you can go back and check them anytime that you want. I will take just a brief moment to thank Buddy Woodbury, Jason Doobie, Shannon, my producer, out at DU Hunting Supply, for once again providing the platform and the means for me to come to you each week. And if you need anything in the line of dog supplies, hunting supplies, apparel, hats, shirts, whatever, go see the good folks at dusupply.com. They'll treat you right. Okay, today, without further ado, I want to introduce someone to you. You're going to recognize right away this voice because I don't think there's very many coon hunters out across the country that haven't met Duke. And you'll notice that he's not from southern Mississippi. He's got a little bit different accent, comes from way up in the Yankee land, up in Connecticut. Duke Proulx. How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing great. Well, one of my major accomplishments when I was at UKC was learning how to properly pronounce your name. I think I'm doing it right, aren't I?
You have it right down to the T.
All right.
You do.
And it's spelled Proulx.
Correct.
And I imagine that you get all kinds of mispronunciations, don't you?
Not many get it right, I can tell you that.
I guess that's French origin, maybe, right?
Yes, it's French.
Yeah.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, Duke, it's just great to have you on board today. And I really would have had you earlier, but you're a pretty elusive guy. I know I've been trying to nail you down for an article for American Cooner magazine for quite a long time, and I realize how busy you are and all that, so I definitely understand. But, man, you've got a resume in this coon hunting sport that few people will ever attain, and there probably are some newer listeners or younger hunters that don't realize just what all you've been up to over the years with the Coonhounds. Before we get into a lot of that, I wanted to just introduce you to my audience and just ask you a few brief things about who you are, where you were born, where you live now, what you do for a living, about your family. Anything of that personal nature. Can you give me a little bio there, Duke?
Well, I was born and raised right here in a little town called Norwich, Connecticut, which I live not more than 10 miles from there now. I've lived here all my life.
That's great. That's great. So is that you've got some property, I believe, around. You guys are involved, I know, in horses quite heavily and all of that. Well, tell me, first of all, about your family, about your wife and your daughter.
Well, I got married. Oh, boy, I would tell you, it's bad. You're getting old. You can't remember when you got married. But I've been married for some time. We have a 14-year-old daughter. Right. And her and her mom are buried deep in these horses. And it takes a lot of our time. Blessed with great parents.
Absolutely. I've been blessed to meet them both, and they are absolute jewels.
So, in saying that, without them, I would never have been successful in the coon dog business, ever.
Well, we're going to talk.
When you're traveling, Steve, when you're traveling, how can you raise puppies?
Mm-hmm.
Who takes care of the dogs that are home when you're gone?
Right. Yeah, that doesn't stop, that care aspect,
No. Absolutely not.
Well, Ella and I just are at the point now in retirement. I've got a couple of dogs, but they're farmed out with guys, partners.
Right.
And here we just have a house dog here, and it's a hassle if you even want to go to a movie or whatever. You got to
Well,
do something with the dog.
and that's our life here. Between we have a small farm. Like I said, I do live out in the country. Everybody thinks the Northeast is city. I live out in the country. Behind my house, there's about 1,000 acres of state land. Now, my dad and mom live across the street and up the road just a bit, stone's throw. And behind their place is about 4,000 acres. So we live out in the country.
Yeah.
Single lane road where I live, you can let dogs run loose, whatnot. But, even to go to dinner, it's hard when you have animals.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Our horse farm, my wife leases a place about 6 miles from here, and she's got anywhere from 16 to 24 head of horses there all the time.
Wow. Now, these are horses she's boarding or training, or are they all your horses?
Most of them, yes, most of them are all training horses. She does pleasure horses, and most of them are all training horses.
I see.
We have, she has 4 or 5 of hers, but then most of them are all training horses that are in there.
Well, since we typically talk about family a little bit in this opening portion of the show, just give us a little rundown of Melissa's successes, and now with Lexi and all. You've done a lot of winning on a major stage.
Yeah, Melissa, she rides pleasure horses, mostly now paints Appaloosas, quarter horses, but mostly Appaloosas. And if I was to quote me, I'd be wrong, but I think she's won 13 or 14 world titles.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah.
And again, just like the coon dog, Steve, it's the travel. Most of the stuff is always in Fort Worth, Texas, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right.
It's a lot of beating on the road. But now, fortunately, my daughter is stepping into her footsteps. She's won now twice in a row the youth world.
Yeah. Well, that comes is going to be a good segue, but I'm not ready to go there quite yet, about how you and I first met. And it involved, in a way, horses, I believe, and you being at the World Hunt. But I want to, before we get into that, when did you actually begin hunting? Was it with your dad, or was it with other family members or neighbors, or how'd that start?
I'd say back I was born in 1968. My mom and dad both coon hunted. And, of course, being a youngster, you wanted to go all the time with your dad, coon hunting at night. Of course, there was times he carried me. I couldn't have been 4 or 5 years old. And like a lot of people start. And then my mom coon hunted. Back when my dad first started, it was more because the hides were $40, $50 a piece, and they coon hunted for hides.
Sure.
And then as they hunted, my dad, he'd bought dogs from Joe House and Merchant, and then they started. They did competitions here locally, but back then you'd go to a local coon hunt, UKC hunt here, there'd be 60 dogs.
Right, and that's in Connecticut. Think about it.
That was here.
Right.
And that's how I got started. And then when it was funny because when the coon hides, when the prices went down, all these old hunters, a lot of them all quit.
Right.
And of course I kept hunting, and it was just a passion. I guess you grow up doing it, and you just you learn it.
Yeah. Was there any early dogs? You mentioned your dad bought dogs from some of the top breeders back in that day. Do you remember any of those early coonhounds back from those days?
Well, my dad, when I was just a boy, my dad had a big old, more like a red and white dog, almost liver color, almost like a bird dog. He was a big old dog. I bet he weighed 80, 90 pounds, and he called him Smokey. And I believe he bought him from Joe House, and or through through somebody that he came from Joe House. And that was probably my old favorite dog, was to go hunt with him. He was kind of quiet on the ground, didn't say a lot, just treat coons, and he was kind of my favorite to take.
I got you.
I followed him as a young kid, going with my dad.
Right. Well, Back then, kind of what did you guys do? Did you walk from the house or did you drive out somewhere to hunt? Or what was the terrain like? And, how was hunting back in those days in the 60s? Well, we're probably talking in the
74,
70s.
75.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And in the early 70s, mid 70s, we lived in a lot of small dairy farm country. A lot of these farms were 200 and 300 acres. We had dairy farms everywhere locally around us. And back then, see, we didn't travel to hunt. I mean, my dad put dogs in a truck, and I think a few times we used to have a station wagon car we hunted out of.
Right. That was my experience too, dude.
And I think we would go 10 miles to go hunt. You know what I mean? The furthest, maybe 15 tops. Compared to today, where sometimes I drive an hour and a half to go coon hunt.
Right. Yeah, that's all changed a lot. When I lived in Michigan, of course, I had about 30 drops within 15 miles of the house. But when I lived in West Virginia, it was sometimes a 70-mile drive to go coon hunting, So if you love it, you figure out a way to do it, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To tell you, to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah.
As a boy, when I started to hunt alone, because you know me, I travel alone. I do pretty much everything alone. So, of course, as I coon hunted, when I got old enough to get through the woods, 10, 11 years old, I went by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived on a dead-end road, and there was a dairy farm down there. And then across the street, the main road, which was never really busy at that time, a lawyer owned a bunch of property, and then we hunt. Well, I used to hunt on a tractor, a lawn with a trailer.
That was the forerunner of your ATV then.
Yeah, it was an old wheel horse, 20 horsepower tractor. I took the mower deck off, and I'd have that wagon with the dog box, and that's how I coon hunt.
I'll be darned. I can see that. I can just envision this kid with a lawnmower and a dog box trailer on the back.
Yep, awesome. That's how I started coon hunting.
Well, that's pretty incredible. Well, what age did the competition thing enter the scene for you?
I'd say for me, of course, like I said, my folks both competition. My mom would show dogs. Even my mom would hunt in hunts. So I'd go with my mom and my dad. I always wanted to go with my dad because them casts were, back then there was some women's casts. If you remember that years ago, they'd have women's casts. And so I would go with my mom and dad any chance I could get. But I'd start hunting the hunts alone or going with a friend would take me. I would say it was about 1978 or 79.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's see, I'm thinking back. I was already back from the military, came back in July 73. Fateful meeting with Fred Miller at Plot Days that year that led to a friendship and ultimately a job for me. But the 70s, I was pretty active in coon hunting until 83 when I went to Michigan, and that kind of slowed down my personal competition hunting and all that when I did that. But that as you said, the hunts were much bigger back then,
and they were 3 hour.
Yeah. I just talked to somebody the other day about that, and we were talking about the length of time that we spent out there, and it's pretty incredible. And
but you remember, Steve, in those days, you liable to have a dog that never treed the cast. They'd run and run and run.
Yeah.
I mean, you just didn't have the tree dogs, and there was a lot of running dogs back then. I remember, and some of your better tree dogs back that day were black and tans, red bones. They really were.
Yeah, well, that's true. And that was my experience back in West Virginia, too, because a lot of the dogs that were brought in, even out of some of the better advertised stud dogs, that were in American Coon or Full Cry, they came into our part of the country, and all they wanted to do was, we didn't have many deer back then, but we had a lot of fox. We had gray fox and red fox, and man, those dogs were reaching back to their roots for sure, because it was tough to find a walker dog that would tree and stay treed,
Well, about 78, 79, my dad kind of figured it was time for me to have my own dog because I wanted to hunt alone. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many dogs we tried and just couldn't find anything, that was, they're trashy. And, cause my dad knew he didn't want me chasing a dog running deer all night.
Right.
And we went through quite a few, and he had a little Walker dog there that was a bad little dog, and I can't remember his name now, but that was the one I first started to hunt alone,
Mm-hmm.
and he died. We don't know if he got into poison or something, but he died.
Uh-oh.
And my dad searched for a year and a half, and finally, my first good dog solo was an English dog.
I'll be darned. I didn't know
Yep.
there was anything else but a Walker dog in your. Well, we do know about a black and tan that occupied a lot of your time, and we're going to talk
Yep.
about that. But so it was an English dog. Were you
Yep.
into pedigrees or anything at that time to remember what
I tell you what happened. We bought this dog, and this is a funny story because I used to love going every year. We went to the Kenton Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had met several different dog dealers and yada yada. And there was a gentleman there. He was from Paducah, Kentucky. His name was Bill Cantor, and he messed with a lot of Vance's Crowd and Billy dogs and Springfield Rock dogs. And I guess he was a big farmer down there because I eventually went to his place once. But my dad and the man just hit it off with my dad. And my dad, he's a talker.
Oh yeah.
And he finally pulled my dad aside, and my dad said, "Hey, listen, I'm trying to get my boy a dog." And I'd worked a vegetable stand at the end of my road that summer to save up money to buy a dog. And my mom and dad, they're willing to help me get a dog. And he finally pulled my dad aside, and he brought my dad around, all the trade rows used to be in Canton.
Oh yeah.
And he told my dad, he said, "You see that English dog right there?" He said, "He come out of my country." He said, "That's a good one." He said, "I'll promise you that." He said, "The man doesn't know what he had."
Mm-hmm.
Well, long story short, the man let us take the dog hunting that night. Trade a couple coons with him that night. We bought him. And that was my first solo dog hunting that I competition on, was that English dog. And he was a good dog.
Yeah. And what did you call him? You remember?
His name was Blade.
Blaze.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Red tick
And I
dog.
made him and that summer, and that fall and spring, I made him a Nite champion. I had a couple wins towards grand on him. I made him a show champion. He had 2 or 3 wins towards grand on that. And that winter came in February, and somebody stole him out of our yard.
Wow. Never found him.
Well, my dad kind of, what happened was the only reason they knew they stole him is our neighbor had an elderly man, her dad. He used to sit in a car every day. He was in a walker.
Yeah.
And he said he saw this vehicle pull in. He lived across the street, and there was snow on the ground. And they walked right over that hill. My dad thinks he knows who took the dog, could never prove it because somebody knew the dog in order to steal it. But yeah, we never did get the dog back.
Yeah. That only happened to me one time. It actually happened to my dad. And that's such an aggravating thing. And I can remember several cases, at the registries when dogs were stolen. And I could go into story after story on that, but I better not. That's a rabbit I better not chase today.
Right.
But yeah, well, so about how old were you at that point?
Well, that was in 1980.
Okay.
So I was about 12.
I got you.
Yep.
Well,
I was about 12, but that dog done me right. But then we went back. My dad made some phone calls. We got a hold of this Bill Cantor down there in Kentucky. And my dad had a couple guys, his buddies, hung around. They drove me from Connecticut all the way to Paducah to this Cantor's place to try out a couple dogs. That's where I actually got my first PCA membership, was there.
nice.
We went to a hunt.
You went to a hunt and you joined PKC way back then.
Yep.
What's your number? Do you remember?
Well, my number now is 23405.
I see. Yeah. Mine's in the 5,000, starts with a 5. So I came along quite a bit.
What happened is I had let my PCA membership go so long. When I started back PKC, they had given me a whole nother membership. So I switched over to that. That was the first place I ever went. And that's where I bought the dog. We tried out a couple dogs that week. We were there for a couple days. And the dog I met you with up at the Princeton Inn in '84, that was the same dog I bought from that man.
I got you. Well, that's a good segue into that. But I wanted to ask you real quickly, when in your earliest memories of competition hunting, did you like it right away? Was there anything that kind of, you didn't like, or you were on the fence about, or were you just all about it from early on?
I would say I was all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I can remember my first year at UKC full-time, Mayfield, Kentucky, and we had the hunt there, the UKC World Hunt. And that's where the boy from Evansville, Indiana, handled the dog that John East owned. What was the dog's name? Oh goodness, I can't think of that right now. But I started with UKC as a field rep back in 1978, the first year the World Hunt was held.
Okay.
But okay, so we did the Mayfield in '83, and I'll think of this guy's name in just a minute. Man, I tell you, getting old is not for sissies, Duke.
It's not. I'm already experiencing that.
Oh man, it doesn't get any better, I promise you. But anyway, okay, we go up to Princeton, Indiana. First time I'd ever been there. That's 38 years ago, if you can imagine that, Duke. And here's this kid, and if I got the story right, or you correct me, I believe you weren't driving yet, and your sister drove you to the hunt.
Correct.
Is that right? And she was
correct.
Involved with horses, right? Wasn't she?
Correct.
Right. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, I took that dog to a qualifier, and it was actually a snowstorm, and he won that qualifier in a snowstorm.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so set to take that dog to that World Hunt. But my mom and dad both worked. My dad always worked 2 jobs. And it was just, we couldn't figure out a way to get me there because it was, you're talking 950 miles.
Yeah.
And finally, my sister said, well, I can get a little, so my sister's older than me, 4 years. So my sister said, we can go. I'll take you out, because somebody was supposed to go, and then they backed out. So last minute, my sister fell forward and said, I'll take you.
Mm-hmm.
So we loaded up in the truck, and we went to Princeton, Indiana.
That's pretty amazing. That was also the first year I met Richard Moore, who was hunting the Rocky dog, the English dog at that time.
Correct.
Well, he might have been hunting something else.
Because Rocky hit more about 1987, 88 is when Rocky became pretty popular.
Yeah, but he was hunting. I remember him being there at the hunt, him being, people saying, that guy's from New York City. He lives in Queens, New York, and he's a preacher. And here he was hunting an English dog. He was carrying the dog in a crate in the back seat of the car. So I remember that vividly. And Richard and I have been friends for many years, and I have really enjoyed his friendship. But the other story there for me was this kid coming all the way from Connecticut. And how old were you then, Duke?
I've been 14.
14 years old, hunting your dog in the World Hunt. That's pretty awesome. I said, this kid is hardcore. He likes this game. Well, do you have any memories at all from that hunt, or do you have?
Well, I got. The odd part was I didn't. Of course, growing up as a kid and reading the magazines, back in the day, for me, my heroes were Russ Beller, Wayne Green, of course, Merchant. And I read about all these guys, but I got beat at that World Hunt by the dog that won the World Hunt.
I see, Hillbilly Mac.
Hillbilly Mac. Yep.
I'll be darned. Well, you were in there. Did they know you were there? Did you make a pretty good showing against him?
I tell you, the cast when I got beat, my dog looked good, but now Hillbilly Mac was tough.
Yeah.
That was the first dog, and I ain't saying the first, but that was the dog that I remembered, being that he didn't say a lot on the ground. He was just getting treed.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But every tree he went to, he had to come.
Yeah, yeah, and I think on the final cast there, it had kind of a all-star cast there of dogs on that final four, and Mac won it. And I remember Wayne Green was hunting a dog on there named Jar, and the Magnum Mike dog Yates, I believe, was a guy that was hunting him, and I think maybe the Striker dog may have been in that cast. But at any
It's funny.
rate, yeah,
It's funny because, of course, 38 years ago, and I'm not, but the man handled the dog was John Henneman.
right.
Well, it's funny because not that many years ago, maybe 20, now 18 years ago, I drew him again.
Mm-hmm.
I was on nowhere. And he, a really very nice fella. And we
Yes.
were just chatting that night. And he said, he said, I remember drawing you way back when we were just a kid. I said, you remember that? He said, yeah. He said, when you won the world hunt after that, he said, I told people that, he told other people, he said, this young man is hardcore hunter. Yeah.
Yeah. How about that? Well, that's definitely a good analysis there by John. John was always a fellow of few words, and I imagine he's still that way. I haven't spoken to him in several years, but it's good to see that he's still hunting. I see his name, his picture in the magazine and online and stuff from time to time. Well, you kind of mentioned it there, and it's going to be like 9 years from that Princeton hunt till you go up to Defiance, Ohio, hunting a dog called Tricolor Tom Tom. Now, what kind of transpired between that initial hunt and your experience there with Tom Tom?
Well, I just knew I had a dog that was going to win. He went from nothing to Grand Night just in one season, and I don't know. I had a friend with me, and the dog. He was a real quick strike dog, probably the best track dog I ever owned in my life to date. The
Mm-hmm.
dog could absolutely fly on the ground.
What was
Wasn't no
he out
fancy
of,
street dog.
Duke?
He was out of Yakima River Tom Tom.
Right, right.
Yep. See, growing up, Steve, I couldn't afford to go buy. Even then, what was I, 22? I couldn't afford to go buy no big dollar dog. But back then, we had coons. I had as good a hunting as Ohio would ever dream of having here.
Mm-hmm.
The rabies hit 93 the year I won the world hunt. And that's when our hunt went south.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to 93, all them hide hunters had quit hunting because coons didn't bring no money.
Right.
So our coon population was just unbelievable. So I could train pups like there was nothing here. And that summer with Tom, that whole year, we knew the rabies was coming because it was on the west side of the river. So I'll be honest with you, that summer, that spring, that fall, spring, and coming into that fall of the World Hunt, September, I believe we shot every coon that dog ever treated because we knew all the coons were going to die.
Right.
And I mean, the dog got hunted literally every night for almost a year. Because if I didn't hunt him, one of my buddies would hunt him. The dog got hunted. The dog wasn't a very big dog. You remember that he was a smaller dog, 45-pound dog.
Yeah.
But the dog was a machine. He really was.
How old was he when he won the world hunt, Duke?
Two and a half.
Yeah. I remember he was young for sure. When did you come up with the Tricolor kennel name?
My mom and dad came up with that.
I see. Yeah.
That's what they called their kennel when I was just a boy.
I gotcha. So he was out of Tom Tom, and do you remember the female he was out of?
The females, her name was Lightfoot Lila, but she went back to some Bozo breeding.
Oh, yeah.
On the bottom side.
Hardwood Bozo.
Yep.
And a lot of the good ones down through the years have come out. If you trace them back, you're going to find old Bozo there.
Right. Well, I believe that what happened, I think she placed in a world hunt, and I believe Randall Myers had bought her to breed to Tom.
I see.
Or
Now,
Tom.
did you get your Tom Tom from Randall as a puppy, or?
No, I didn't. I bought him as a started dog from a gentleman named Bart Schneider up in northern Indiana. That's where I bought the dog, as just a started dog. Course back then, I didn't, I watched all the paperwork on dogs. Of course, then it was Pac-Man and Striker and Yak River Tom Tom, and I'd seen Tom had placed in the World Hunt twice, and
Right.
and I just I had an old Grand Night dog that my dad had purchased, and I carried him some larger hunts, hunt against hardwood dam and this and that, but I just knew he didn't quite have enough to compete with the dogs that were winning. So I bought him as a young dog and had him shipped in, and I just went to hunt him after that. And that's how I got Tom Tom.
I see. And you knew pretty soon then that you had a potential winner there?
Well, to make a short story funny, back then, see if you could have dogs shipped in. They flew them in.
Oh, yeah.
So I buy this dog and I fly him in. An old buddy of mine who's a retired game warden, we took a ride up to the airport and got him. And we literally looked in this crate, and there was this dog in the back of this crate staring at us like he was going to faint. And he looked so scared. And we thought it was from the airplane ride. Well, come to find out it wasn't. He had been abused.
Oh.
So I get him home, and literally we had to put the crate in the kennel, open the door. The dog never came out of the crate for a whole day. So what are you going to do? You own it. You know what I mean? So he was in that kennel, and my dad said, "Well, what'd you buy there?" I said, "I don't know, Dad. Don't look good. I know that." And he was shy. You couldn't touch him. I mean, he'd cower down. And well, about 3 or 4 nights, I was still taking that old Grand Night dog hunting, Well, one night I went out there to get him out of the kennel, and old Tom was standing on that wire like he was ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I opened the door, put a tracking collar on him. Of course, that's back. We had to do a wildlife, beep collars.
Yeah.
Loaded old Ike in the truck. That was my dad's old Grand Night dog, and I loaded Tom in the truck. And I went over here, a farm close by my house, and turned loose. And Ike went in, struck a little track, bang tree. Nothing out of that pup. About that time, I heard this pup strike way to the back of this cornfield, and not like Indiana, Ohio cornfields, but here, big cornfields, 15, 18 acres.
Right.
He strikes in the back of this cornfield. He's running this track up right through the middle of the corn, came right by me. I mean, within 20 yards of me. Went right up to the fence line up where my truck was parked and fell tree. Went up there, wasn't no fancy hard tree dog. Went up there, he's got a coon. Well, I tie him up. I go back, get the old Grand Night dog, and put him in the truck and go back, pat him up good, and I shot that coon out. Well, from that night on, I went to hunt that dog, and every night, during the day, he'd hide in the dog box all day. Nighttime, as it got dark, he'd be on that wire, wanting to go hunt.
I'll be darned. Did he continue that his whole life, or did he finally get over?
He was always a little funny around strangers. People would even know when they'd come. Like if my mom and dad would always take him to large events, Grand American and whatnot. And he was always a little funny, and he would never breed a female without me or my dad there.
I see. Yeah,
that was just him.
Yeah. They all have personalities.
Yeah.
They?
Yep.
Okay, well, so then you qualified him, and did we have the zone hunts at that time, or we?
Yeah, we had the zone hunts then. Yep.
So how did that kind of go? Do you have any memories from that World Hunt?
You in your article when I won the World Hunt, I believe, I could be wrong by a few numbers, but I think you said he scored 3,275 plus points. And zero minus points in the World Hunt.
Wow. Well, now was that taking the zones through the finals? The zones.
That was from the qualifier right through the zones, right through the finals.
Wow. I know I have that magazine. I tried to keep the magazines that I wrote articles in over the years, and kind of got that stuff stored away, and it really just needs to be dumped, But
my mom has kept a few of them ones that I won that had the articles, and she has them like vanilla envelope sealed.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, cool. Well, so that was in Defiance, Ohio.
Yep.
up in the northwest part, when of course those coon are plentiful up there.
Right.
Always have been. So you've got a world champion. How did that change your life at all?
Well, growing up as a kid, starting competition with your parents, and as you get into your 20s, um, it was basically at that time, it was that dream came true.
Oh, yeah. There's guys like me that have been at this for a long time, and never won a world hunt, never really, aspired to win a world hunt. But I think every coon hunter, and that was simply because of the nature of my work. I knew I wasn't going to be out there gunning for it, but I think every coon hunter secretly would like to say, I could get my picture on the cover of that magazine as a world champion.
Well,
that time.
what the biggest problem is with not a problem, but the biggest thing with in anything you do, I don't care if it's coon hunting, horses, bass fishing, whatever you do, um, it's the sacrifice that you want to put into it.
Right.
It's the people say, "Oh, that's neat. You want a world hunt," and just like my wife, what she does with the horses, and my daughter, "Oh, you guys are so lucky." Well, it's not luck.
No.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I think it's Jerry Mall that quoted, I guess it was Vince Lombardi, but the will to win's not nearly as important as the will to prepare to win.
Correct. Well, I tell everybody to win a world championship or a major event, or to get yourself on top, whether it be coon dogs, race cars, bass fishing, getting on top is difficult. Staying on top is hard.
Yeah, in fact, things are moving so fast now, Duke, that I can't keep up with it. I had a podcast before that we tried to keep some competition news coming, and it was already old news. By the time I could record it and drop it into podcast format and have it on the air within a week, it's old news. It's been around the internet several times, and things are just moving so fast. But back in that day, we were still all about the magazines,
That's right.
and getting your
You
news.
waited for that to come.
Yeah.
You waited for that book to come. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I can remember as a kid, in my experience, waiting for the October issue of American Cooner, because that was the world championship, the ACHA world champion appeared on the cover, and the score, not the scorecard, but they posted each night of hunting and each dog's score. I think it was Floyd Butler, the secretary of ACHA, that wrote out those handwritten the dogs' names and their scores. And that was our news. That's the way we got it back then. And then that was usually 30 days or so after the fact, unless you were.
If you knew who won the world hunt that week, you knew something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, well, when I went to UKC in 1983, I was privileged to go out to Gray Summit, Missouri, to my personal first Purina Award banquet. And there was a guy named Jennings Lewis, that won the first Purina Award with a dog called Rebel. And then the next fall, a guy named David Blankenship and his partner Harvey French won the Purina race with a dog called Rock River Banjo. And I was so impressed with the Purina people, and we're going through the Purina farms and all of that. I mean, it made a lasting impression on me, because I said, if these people are putting this much money and effort into research and development, they have to be building a good product, or they're wasting a lot of money.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Steve. My parents always fed Purina feed. Okay, so I just grew into feeding Purina feed.
Mm-hmm.
But after going to that farm for the first time, And there was a woman in, and I don't remember her last name. I remember her first name was Mary. I had missed some of the
She was a
tour.
doctor. She was a PhD. She was one of the
Very nice, very nice.
Fuller, I believe.
Mary, yes. Well, she took me on a personal tour around the farm because I'd missed some of it. And I was so impressed with Purina. And still to this day, and I don't knock no other kind of brand of dog food, but still to this day, I feed Purina.
Yeah. And I do too, Duke. And again, it's not, about, Purina. It's not paying me to say that, or you. But it is impressive. Well, okay. So that's how, and for many years, I worked very closely with the folks at Purina in that Purina competition. You mentioned Hardwood Dan a while ago, a dog that won it twice. Back in the day, I had to believe that Purina race was the toughest thing in coon hunting to win. And from that, the reason I say that is, the thing went on for all year, and if you got in the race, you had to be there. If it was 500 miles or 1,000 miles or whatever, you had to be out there running the thing. So our listeners should know that in 1996, you won the Purina competition with a black and tan female named Crow Hill Candy. And she was owned by Leon Richard, I believe.
Yep. Yes.
Tell me about Candy and about that Purina race and about how that was back in 1996.
Well, how it all came apart is I never really knew Leon Richards. He lived north of me about 3 hours, maybe 4. And when I won the World Hunt with Tom, he had called and congratulated me. And we got small talking, and of course he had snow on the ground and I didn't. I said, "Well, geez, come down. I'll take you hunting anytime you like." So he came down one night and went hunting. I asked him, "Where's your dog?" "Oh, I didn't bring a dog. I was just going to go with you, whatever." I said, "Well, okay." Well, a few other times he come, and finally he brought this black and tan. And I knew of some of the bloodline that she was out of. Went back to Johnny and Bruce Gillum stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And another gentleman that was north of us, Chris Ballou.
Right.
And I knew they were pretty good. They were a good line of dog. Well, I went home with this dog a little bit. She was kennel stale. I hadn't had her out since December. And man, I started seeing this dog do some good work. They'd come down about a dozen times. I was going to say, that's a nice dog. Kind of tight on the ground, didn't say a lot, just fell treed and accurate. And how I really got hooked up with him is they were going to black and tan days in May. And I said, "Hey, good luck." And I didn't have a dog to hunt. At that time, I just had a young dog out of my dad's white dog I was telling you about that I'd want to walker days with him, but he was young. He was like 14 months old, and I didn't want to push him hard in hunts. So they said they were going to black and tan days, and I said, "Well, good luck." They said, "Well, we're not going to hunt it. We're just going." I said, "Why aren't you going to hunt that dog in it?" "Oh, we don't know if she could win it. And, we don't know if she could compete." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go with you. I'll handle her." So we went, and I got first place registered one night, and I got second place registered the next night with her. And how I really got beat out in the high scoring dog is Russ Beller had won it one night with Saigon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got hooked up with them guys with that dog.
I got you. Well, and so then did you go, was that the year that you
No, it was that year. That was 95.
Okay, yeah.
And they took her to a qualifier and got her qualified. And then they weren't going to take her to the World Hunt. Well, I didn't have a dog to take, so I took her to the UKC World, and I think it was in South Boston, Virginia that year.
Yeah. Is that the year that Buck Two Dog won it?
No, and I ended up getting fifth place with her.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where her and I started our competition endeavor after that. Was after that hunt.
I got you. So then you did a lot of traveling.
So yeah, we got talking, and again, Tom's pups weren't really that old at that time. You know what I mean? And so him and I had a nice young dog. Tom, he got killed by a car, and I didn't have nothing. And we got talking, and I said, "Hey, this dog can win anything a walker dog can win. I promise you she can." She's as good a dog as I'd seen in any color. And so they decided they wanted to run that Purina race. And I explained to them, I said, it's very expensive. We're going to be on the road. They said, let's travel. So the way we went.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.
But that was the year they extended on us.
Well, that year, did you end up going to Texas for the award?
Yeah, but that year, Steve, was the year that the Purina race didn't run from October to October. It ran from October through October to January.
Okay.
That was the only time the season was ever extended.
All right. I left UKC in June of 98.
Yep.
And because I remember it was June, because the first PKC hunt that I worked was the national championship in Flora, Illinois, and that was in June. But the last couple of years that I was with UKC, I was taken out of the field operations department and named the senior vice president for public relations and legislative affairs, which meant that I worked mostly with the legislative stuff. So I really wasn't involved then with that change. And that I guess I didn't even remember that occurred at that time. But yeah, well, so
but
anyway.
But you were there that because you were at the World Hunt when she got sick. That's when the Mac dog beat me.
Okay, that was in Iowa. Yeah.
Yep, that was in 96 also.
Right.
So 95, she got 5th place in World Hunt. 96, she got 2nd place.
That's right. She was in that Final Four. I remember that now for sure. Well, okay, you kind of described her already, I think, that she was, you said she didn't open a lot on the ground, but she was a coon treer and yeah.
Always by herself, real independent.
Yeah. Was she bred at all?
They did, and she threw a couple of dogs that were decent, but she never threw her.
I got you.
Of course, I didn't chase that, Steve. I went back to my roots with the dogs I had. You know
sure.
what I
mean? Yeah. Well, I knew it was everybody in the sport was talking about, what's Duke doing running this black dog,
Well, but, they did until they drew her. Then they knew why.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you weren't done yet as far as UKC is concerned, and I want to ask you about the other registries and all, but since we're on UKC, we might as well jump up the next year after you won the Purina race with Candy. You go down to Boaz, Alabama. Now, I remember working with the people down there at Boaz and setting that hunt up, okay? But I was not there at that hunt. That was part of what I just talked about, my transition into a different area. But where did you hook up with this Rocky Mountain Jasper dog?
Well, Lynn Bashuker out of New York, he had bred his female, or actually it was a female he bred out of his dog. One of his college buddies had her, and they bred her to Tom. So they had that litter of pups that was Jasper, and there was 4 or 5 good pups in that litter, all of the same cross. And well, how it happened was they took the dog, Lynn and his buddy. They took the dog to the zones, and I think they were in. I think the zones that year were in Holmesville, Ohio.
Okay.
Well, at the time, I was hunting a dog for a man out of Oklahoma called Lou's Foggy Night RJ, and and I ended up winning the Purina race with him in '97 that same year. Well, I went to the zones. About an hour into the cast, we had to call a timeout. And I'll never forget this. We called the time because there was an issue with landowners and whatnot. Well, the hour got, and I got scratched. So, of course, once you're scratched, you can't hunt the next night.
Right.
So they'd won 2 rounds with that Jasper dog. He was still a registered dog. He wasn't even a night champion. So, in saying that, Lynn's a good fella, still a great guy. And we got talking, and Lynn said, hey, this kid that was hunting the dog with him, he said he can't even go to the finals of the World Hunt. He said, is there any way we could talk you into taking this dog? I said, yeah, I'll take him. So I had another female at the time called Samantha that was out of Tom that made it through. So we were going anyways. And I was going to let this other fellow hunt Samantha. So I only hunted the dog 3 nights before I ever won the world hunt.
You didn't use that old method, strike the first dog that barks and tree the first dog that trees, did you?
Well, I'll tell you what happens, Steve, is, in all honesty, the first night I ever turned him loose, he sounded and acted just like Tom.
Mm-hmm.
It was like hunting Tom. And I'll be honest, not knocking it. He probably wasn't as fast a track dog as Tom, but he sounded identical to him.
How about
So
that?
I knew then I was going to have no problem handling this dog at the World Hunt. I mean, he sounded just like Tom. And he liked to be by himself. He was pretty much alone. Matter of fact, in that final cast, I don't think him and Box ever treed together.
I'll be darned. Now, was Martin Spears involved with that dog?
Yeah, yep. Martin was hunting him, correct?
Yeah.
And I believe I'm trying to think of the man's name. I know you know it. I think his last name was Pruitt. He was a Redbone man. He guided us in the final cast.
And that was in Alabama.
In Boaz.
Yeah.
Yep. I think his last name was Pruitt. Lyndon Pruitt, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds right, Duke.
And I'll tell you, that was the best hunting I'd ever been in. And that hunt is rough.
Oh, yeah, it's hilly, isn't it?
But when that man brought us in that big bottom, that was the prettiest hunting. There was coons everywhere in there.
Mm.
I mean, that was a real place to hunt a final cast. Everyone was dreading every cast was tough. You know what I mean? It was that was a tough hunt. Matter of fact, I had one round, the round before the final. Jim Ridge's dog got hit hit on the road and killed in that cast.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, so that hunt down there with Boaz was tough.
Yep. And that was the first one I didn't get to attend since way back in 1983.
It was funny because the female that I took down there, we only had a 2-dog final because the other cast had never treated coons.
Mm-hmm.
And my female was one of them.
Yeah.
They didn't treat a coon to get in that final. That cast was a dead cast.
Wow. Well, so in the period of 4 years, you win a world championship in 93, you win the Purina race in 96, and then you come back and win the world hunt again in 97. About that time, did you start hunting PKC more, or how did that come about?
It was, I'll tell you, be honest with you, Steve, after, of course, when I was hunting Snap, or I call it Snap Candy in the Purina race, that year I put 165,000 miles on my truck in 15 months. And so, then winning the World Hunt with Jasper, actually for winning the World Hunt with Jasper, the man who owned RJ was calling me to handle him in this Purina race. And I said, man, I'm not going to do it. I'm burnt out. I'm done. And then about June, he called me, talked me into it. And I jumped in the race in June and won it by the end of the year with RJ.
So you won the Purina race again?
Yeah, I won it. I won in 96 and 97 with 2 different dogs.
Okay, that's one thing I missed in my notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And won it with an inbred dog. Can you imagine
Come on now.
Yes, sir. He was out of a mistake out of Texas. Both dogs were lip-bred dogs. It was a brother-sister cross.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a big old houndy-looking lipper dog, smart, didn't say a lot on the ground. He just couldn't believe he was inbred. So this dog, his name was RJ. His name was Lou's Foggy Night RJ. He come out of Oklahoma. And, he was out of a brother-sister cross. It was an accident. And I acquired the dog through a gentleman that wanted me to handle the dog for him in the hunts. And he wanted me to, back when it first started, and I just said, no, I'm not interested. I'm just tired. I've been traveling for 15 months, and I was burnt out. Well, then he talked me into it in June. Of course, we jumped in the race in June. That's when Randy Leonard was hunting a blue dog for Brent Lipscomb. And what's the gentleman out there? Oh, boy, I'm bad with names, Steve. Getting old. Joe Rember.
Oh, yeah, in Paris, Texas.
Yeah, he was hunting a blue dog in a race. There was about 3 blue dogs in a race at that time, and then there was Dick Brothers hunting that Sarah female. Mm-hmm. And of course, fortunate, blessed, I don't know what you want to call it, but I jumped in the race with RJ, and he was just a consistent coon trader. It was nothing real fancy, just get in there by himself, have a coon trade. And that was the same year I won the Centennial that UKC held, the 100th anniversary up in Michigan.
Right.
I won that with him.
Yep. That was all in 97.
That was all in 97,
yep.
Correct?
Yeah, I didn't have an argument, but I didn't understand his rationale with Fred Miller when I was with UKC. UKC was founded in 1898. Yep. And so Fred wanted to have the centennial celebration in 1997. He said that's 100th year, And I said, well, typically 1898 to 1998 would be your centennial celebration. But he was the guy that signed the checks. So he won that argument. And that was when they did have the centennial there at the fairgrounds in Kalamazoo. Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Yeah. And so then when I won the race with him, moving on forward to me going to another kennel club, I didn't really just go to it. I still hunted UKC hunts. I don't know, PKC was just growing leaps and bounds at that time. And of course, I was interested in winning money, I mean, and at that time, I'd went into business for myself, and I was pretty much kind of done with the traveling. I still traveled hard, but just not every weekend. I was burnt out.
Well, it's certainly understandable for sure. And the lure of PKC got me too, because it was in 1998 that I went to work for them. So,
so you and I made the transition around the same time.
Right about the same time.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to jump over this one here that we kind of said we're going to talk about your breeding program down through the years. You had a pretty good female that is showing up on an awful lot of pedigrees of hounds today. And I've had a couple myself. I've got a puppy here now that's out of Trackman Seaman, and a female that was out of Bone Collector, and Randy Smith's Biffy Sioux female that won the World Hunt in 2016. But that was this female you had named Stylish Nowheres. Now, that is an unusual name for a female. How'd you come up with that name?
I bought it that way.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yep. I at the time, I was hunting Stylish Harry Jr. when Nowhere come about for Stuart Blankenship. And Harry was a nice dog. I did some winning with him. And a couple fellas, Nick Brady, Nick.
Oh, yeah. West Virginia boy.
Fisher, 2 or 3 of the guys had called me and told me about this Nowhere's dog in Ohio. I said, of course, I was running wild, working every day and trying to coon hunt, just trying to keep up with life. And I said, hey, if she's that good, we'll just buy her. Well, I got a hold of this gentleman, and his name was Steve Kahn, nice guy. Well, apparently he had just purchased her from somebody else. She went through a couple of hands there pretty quick. Told me about her. He said what he wanted her for. I said, well, I'll just buy her. So I sent the money to Eric Fisher, and Eric went and picked her up. And that's how I ended up getting her. Of course, they would tell me she was a superstar. But I guess how Nick and Eric explained it, she was just a diamond in the rough. Because she was only about 14 months old when I bought her.
Okay.
And so that fall, I let Eric hunt her for a little bit. He got her like September. So that fall, I went out to Eric's and got her, brought her back home, and she was in a little rough shape. Made some TLC, and that's when her and I, that's when we started that journey of. I've never been a pup trainer, Steve. I'll be honest with you. I don't like training puppies, but you give me something that started, and I'll make them something. That's what I do.
Well, apparently you did with her. Tell us about some of her accomplishments and what you do with her. And then when you ultimately decided to breed her.
Well, everybody in today's world, because Nowhere is her legacy is sliding away, but everybody claimed her to be this great reproducer, and she was. but I thought she was a better coon dog than even a reproducer.
Mm-hmm.
That 1 year, of course, where I live, I won about $4,500 that year just in open events with her, traveling. Every event I went to, I'd be in the Final Four. And that's back when we had 150, 160 dogs in an event. And she was one of them dogs, if when the coons were moving right, she would literally annihilate a cast. Always by herself. She was quick. She didn't say hardly anything on the ground. Explosive tree dog, had a big mouth. She was loud. But her one hole, how I'd get beat, she couldn't take a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And that's how I lost. Not that Tizzy Dog, when she won the Super Stakes, didn't do a great job that night, but that's how she walked into it because nowhere quit. We had almost a tornado come through. As a matter of fact, I remember Larry Meeks calling people and saying, "Hey, if you can get your hands on them dogs, call timeout." The tornado came through. And the storm was so bad, the 15 got me and I got scratched.
Yeah.
And that was what she couldn't handle.
Yeah. Well, now, did you own her when she was bred to Homer?
Yeah, everything. I bred her the first time I bred nowhere. I bred her to Schooner with Fred.
Okay.
But she only had 2 pups, and I had one, and I kept him for quite a few years. I sold him as he got older. I called him Tough, and he was a Grand Knight.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had another one they called Fred. Doug Compton had, and he got blasted and died at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to bring back to Fred, and one night I drew Homer with Dale Bowen hunting him, and he was loud. Of course, he was inbred.
Quickly. Well, since we talked about inbreeding, it was where
Fred bred his mama,
Fred
Valley Queen.
Yeah. Yep. Raccoon Valley Queen, and that's what produced Homer. And here he was, this Fred was very young, only like 11 months old or something when that happened. Right. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's when was Alan Smith?
Well,
Tennessee.
Fellow was the minister that had Raccoon Valley Queen, wasn't he?
I remember. I can't
remember his name. Real flamboyant guy. He'll probably laugh at me.
I can remember his face.
Yeah. Me too. That's another thing. I'll have to put a prologue onto this thing. Here's all the things that came to me after we stopped recording. But
it's funny because Homer was a real stylish, on the wood, explosive tree dog. Yeah. But what impressed me the most is we went into one tree, and my dog wasn't there. We went into one tree, and there was a dog about hanging off that dog's neck, and he would not fight.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the most impressive thing, because Homer himself, one night he looked unbelievable, unbeatable, and the next night he didn't look that good. He was kind of wishy-washy. He wasn't very consistent. But he had that mouth and that look and that drive. There was something special about him. So at the time, Keith Medley, about a year or so, Keith bought him.
Right.
And I drew Keith at Spring Classic Nowhere, and I forget what dog he was hunting. And Nowhere put on a clinic that night. She looked good. And Keith Medley, I think to this day, I'll still tell people it was the worst he ever got beat in a cast in his life. Because I like Keith, you know him. He's
he was recently on a podcast with
really?
Tyler Duncan down in Coonhound.
I'll tell you what I loved about him. You never had to guess what he was thinking. He told you.
That's for sure.
And so I said to him, I said, when Nowhere comes back in heat, I'm coming down to breed the Homer. He said, oh, yeah, and he didn't believe me. He really didn't. Well, she come in the heat. I called him. I said, I'll be at your house next Thursday night at midnight and breed this dog. He said, what dog? I said, Nowhere. Keith, he said, you're serious? I said, I'm dead serious. Well, midnight, I pulled in his driveway, tooting the horn. We bred a Homer, and up the road I went. But, I bred her Homer twice, right in a row.
Okay.
Because the first time she only had three pups, and they were all males. Me, I'm not a male dog guy.
Right.
And it was strange. She came back, instead of being in 6 months, she came back in 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back and bred to him again. Again, I only had 3 pups, but this time I had 2 males and a female.
Okay. That was your keeper then.
I kept her. We called her Baby. Yep.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, she just died about a year and a half ago.
Let's stop right here and give a shout out to your mother. Is there anybody in the world that can do a better job raising puppies than her?
Not that I know of, I'll be honest. My mom and dad just, and Steve, they love it. I mean, they love it. I have a litter here right now. They're about 10 days old, and they're actually upset that they're not up there at their place, which they only live. I mean, they only live a quarter mile up the road, if that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just my females used to being here, so I'm raising the pups here. But yeah, I mean, there ain't nobody that can raise puppies.
Well, we'll give your dad credit too, but I know your mother's always the one out there tending them at Autumn Oaks or whatever. And
it's just,
yeah.
You know what it is? Because my dad, he's down there at the farm getting local milk, giving these pups fresh raw milk. And my mom will clean out them horse stalls and have them pine shavings and I bring them pups them hunts, and people can't believe they're only 9 weeks old. They look like they're 10, 12 weeks old. They're big.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But they let them out every day and have exercise, and that's just how they grow. And it's just unbelievable how they can raise puppies. It is.
Well, yeah, and they're such great folks. Well, okay, so we got nowhere, and where was the decision? Well, okay, where did Bone Collector come from? Which one of these litters?
Bone was out of the first litter.
Okay.
And what happened was Ryan Crowson and I decided, we were going to raise these pups, and I gave Doug Compton one. All right. So Ryan Crowson had one. Doug Compton had one. Well, me and Ryan had. I kept him here. And then a guy named Fred Gearin up in New York had one.
Yep.
The whole litter turned out. Okay. But now Bone was a kind of a ball mouth tree dog.
Right.
And we had a boy in Oklahoma named Richard Hull hunting him. And what happened was the original, I don't say original, whatever, but Doug Compton's dog got hit by a car and killed. Well, Doug called me up and he was upset, which, rightly so. So I said, I'll tell you what I'll do, Doug. I said, you can have Bone, my half. You just buy out Ryan's half. Ryan ain't a male dog. Ryan, he hunts all females. I hunt females. He was kind of a ball mouth tree dog. I didn't like that. Not knocking the dog by any means. Look at all the stuff he won. But he just was not my style.
Yeah.
So Doug said, well, I said, you can have my half. I don't care. He'd give me a pup that would have been a younger sister to Nowhere, which I called Somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt obligated to, help him. So that's how Doug got the dog. The dog was about 14 or 15 months old when Doug got him.
I see. And of course, the rest is history, as they say.
Oh yeah, he just, you couldn't be any more proud, for something out of your stuff to do what they do with Bone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now, Nowhere's been elected into a Hall of Fame, hasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah. And that which one is that?
She was in PKC.
In the PKC.
Well, the problem is she never had enough puppies to go into UKC.
Mm-hmm.
I was short because she always had small litters.
Yeah, and that's just the difference, combining titles, I guess, to dollars,
Well, I can tell you a quick story on her. Of course, my better cross, honestly, according to stats, was when I bred it to Tequila Sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only litter. Now, I don't know about by now, but back when they inducted her into the PKC Hall of Fame, they said it was the only litter born in PKC registry that every pup in that litter had won money in PKC events.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Did Ashley own Sunrise at that time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Those are dogs that will live on in infamy, as they say, in the Walker breed, for sure.
And I still have one of them dogs still alive.
Really?
She's 13 years old. She's still at my dad's place. Yep.
That's how old did Nowhere? How old was she when
She
she
was just a
died?
little over 12. She was a little over
Uh-huh.
12 when she died.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, you still know. I want to talk about this Chili dog.
Yep.
You were obviously pretty proud of that dog. And I want you to tell me about Chili and about what happened to him and just anything
Well,
you can
what happened
remember
was
about.
of course, you know me. He was against all odds because he was a male. I don't
Right.
like hunting male dogs. But I had a gentleman call me, and I met this young fellow, Ryan Hayes. He owned Chili's mother, and a real nice young man, super nice guy. And then his buddy, his name was Wes Gilroy, and Wes hunts blue dogs.
Mm-hmm.
But they were they're farmer boys from Iowa. You just couldn't get no nicer guys. Just the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Well, they would tell me about these pups that this kid had, and they were like 5.5 months old, and they ran and treed. Well, they didn't want to sell none of them. Well, Chili, he was probably the least talented out of them, apparently. So I finally got talking and got talking, and I don't know. At the time, I had a partner, a great guy, still friends with him. His name was Jason Edmonds from South Carolina, but he always wanted a male dog. So I bought this pup, and Cody Sipe picked him up for me and brought him right to Michigan because that's when the Michigan season was just open. He left the UKC World Hunt. It was always the end of September. Brought the pup back to me. He was about 5.5 months old, and they said he'd run a tree. Well, I didn't know. I never hunted with him. We carried him hunting that night. Brian, you remember Big Brian Gray?
Oh, yeah, very well. That's who he and Eric Fairchild had Fred when I hunted with him in Michigan.
So Brian Gray and Jeremy Kolick.
Oh, yeah.
Shane Groves, Steve Burkholder. We all were pleasure hunting there that week. Well, we had Chili, 5.5 months old, just a big old dopey long-eared pup. They had their dogs. Well, we first turned loose. We turned these dogs loose, and they're running in the cornfield. All of a sudden, that pup just falls off and gets treed. We didn't know it was him. I mean, we just heard this dog start treeing. Just oh. We start laughing. We go in there, we weren't laughing. He had a coon. Well, it was season. They shot it out, and from there, well, because everybody wanted to buy part of him, then I said, "No, he's going home with me." And I had a good friend. He passed away of brain cancer. His name was Daniel Snyder, and he lived in Brazil, Indiana. Well, I brought that pup home and hunted him a little bit. I told Daniel, I said, Daniel, I need this pup hunted by himself. He's ready. And I dropped him off, and he hunted him the whole Indiana coon season. And he just, from there, it went on and on.
And he was out of what?
He was out of Bone Collector. And then his mother was out of, getting old, Steve. His mother was out of Night Rock and Broad.
Okay. Yeah.
And, which was Rat Attack, basically,
right.
And he just was one of them dogs, just probably the only dog in my life, including Tom, Nowhere, Snap, on. He never labored a day in his life trying to trick him. He just made it look easy. Everything he did.
I know. Well, tell me about what happened to his leg.
Well, what happened was the first hunt I ever carried him to was automotive. He was only about 15, 16 months old. And I won first place register with him down there. It was high scoring dog. I didn't win automotive because he wasn't a grand knight because he was registered, but I was high scoring dog of the hunt. And I said, he looked impressive. I think he treated 5 coons. He made a slick and treated 5 coons 6 coons by himself. And he was only 15 months old. Well, I was pretty proud of him. I took him a couple PKC hunts, and I got his money won so I could go to the Super Stakes. Well, at the Super Stakes, that's when they had the Super Stakes and the World Hunt combined.
Right.
We stayed
the
for 2 weeks.
10-day deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you, Steve. I hunted the dog at Super Stakes and never won a cast. Well, I was ready to go home. Well, my partner, Tom Gilbert, was with me, and we were hunting a little female called Shine at the time also, who she was out of Hill Sunrise to Nowhere. He said, well, I don't want to go back. I want to hunt the World Hunt. I said, all right, we'll stay. Well, I hunted Chili one night, the World Hunt didn't do no good. And I said, well, I'm done with him. young, he'd never been in many casts and everything. You understand them dogs out there fast, quick. It was kind of blowing his mind. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And not that he wasn't trained as the coons, he didn't have the experience. Well, Tom ends up getting shined in. Well, on Thursday night, he says, "Hunt him again. I'll pay the entry." I said, "Ain't the money." He said, "Hunt him again. Hunt him." Well, I got him in at the World Hunt, and he marched right through to the final cast. And he was only about, like I said, 17 months.
Yeah, that just tells you that sometimes you just have to persevere,
Well, I'll tell you, it was probably the most memorable cast I'd ever been on, was the cast before the final cast of any dog ever hunted. I had Randy Morgan hunt that lace female. She was a good one. I had Robbie Stivers hunting jigs. And I had, what's the boy's name? I know his name. He lives down by Scott England. I had a female called Miami Valley Jigs. Lewis. His last name is Lewis. Okay. Dang, I know that. Scott Lewis.
Okay.
Well, we get in this final cast, and I had a girl guiding us out of Flora, Illinois. You might remember her, that girl. She always guided casts out of Flora.
Was it Sharon Jelly?
I wouldn't know her name. She had glasses, younger girl.
I'm not sure.
Well, anyway, she takes us to this place to hunt. Goes in this big bottom, beautiful, beautiful place. Well, these dogs tree coons all over me. When we come out of this, we call time after about an hour, and we're going to cross this big field to go to another section to hunt it. Well, I was going to withdraw because I'm sitting at 0, a couple circle trees. These dogs got 400 or 500 plus. But I'm here. I'm going to turn loose. Well, we turn loose on this next bottom, and Chili Tree is 5 coons, and wins the cast. I win the cast in the last minute of the hunt. Randy Morgan had me beat by 50. And Lace is over here struck. Jigs is over here. We haven't heard Chili. A minute left in the hunt. He falls trading. I strike and tree him. I go in. I got a coon and beat him.
Wow. Barn burner for sure. Right. And what year was that?
Geez, you got to ask me these kind of questions. 2012, maybe?
Yeah.
I think it was still 2012. Because that's the year that it was me, Coy Sullivan, the Griffin boy. What was that dog's name that won that hunt?
Doug Griffin from Georgia?
No, Bill.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
That old dog had went around a couple different hands, and he won that World Hunt that year.
Right. Well, but
then he got hit by a car.
Okay.
Lost his leg. I told everybody that he hunted so hard and fast and deep that he would get run over. You knew it, just the way he covered ground. That the dog just absolutely would just float through the world all the time you turned him loose. And I watched the car hit him. I tried to stop the car, but he hit him.
Well, now let me ask you this. Of course, that had to be a heartbreak for you. But just back to the way he operated. It sounds like he was a dog that moved around good. Was he what you call an ambush type dog, or
he just popped them coons up.
Mm-hmm.
That was his style.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
A big scoring dog. I mean, 2 years in a row at the Spring Classic, I scored over 1,200 with him, and I scored 800 or 900 with him down in Texas, down to Lone Star, on 3 legs.
Yeah, it's amazing the heart that these dogs have. I've hunted with a few 3-legged dogs, over the years.
And he was, for him to carry himself as fast as he could move. One night I drew Barry Kitty at the World Hunt, and I didn't win the cast, but Barry said he'd never seen a dog move through the country like that on 3 legs ever. I mean, cutting across the field, he could keep up with them dogs on 3 legs.
Now, did he lose a front or a back leg?
A back leg.
Yeah. Well, it's easier for him to steer, and negotiate with a back leg than it is a front leg. Yeah.
It was fortunate there was a back, because he was a big, heavy-chested dog.
Yeah.
Because he was a big dog. He probably went 90 pounds. And so if he was a front leg, he could never move like he moved.
Right. And you pretty much moved him inside after that, didn't you?
Yeah, he was a house dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd lay on the couch and carry him home and come home. He'd go back to sleep on the couch. He was never tied up after that. And like I said, a wild of a hunting dog he was, he'd never leave the yard. Well, he would every now. We always kept a track car 24/7.
Yeah,
At,
just
at
in
that time,
case.
I put one of them dog trays on him, and we'd set it up on an iPad in the house so we could see where he went. And he'd only venture off every now and then, but he lay around like a yard dog, carry him hunting at night.
Oh, yeah, the heart of a dog again. Say there is amazing. Well,
Well,
Duke,
I'm saying that
yeah, go ahead.
all the dogs I own in my life, and I've been blessed with some great ones and some great partners on these dogs. He's the smartest. He was my favorite of every dog I've owned.
Mm-hmm.
That's that dog.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I was very disappointed when the bone collector grandson that I have here, I still own him, but he, proved to be a thyroid dog and has, frankly, I mean, he looked like the world was his oyster, and then he started to go backwards, and, now he's just mediocre at best. But, these dogs, they get next to us, and the older we get, my experience is the softer I get with my dogs.
Definitely with me, I promise you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what are you doing now? I mean, as far as your hounds are concerned and all.
Oh, it's like if you ask me what I'm doing now, I work every day. I'm getting fat and old. That's all I'll tell you.
Well, this gas thing, of course, for anybody that travels like you do, man, oh man, have you ever estimated the number of miles you've driven over the years? Because I don't know anybody that's driven any more than you have around the country.
If I would estimate in the 35, 40 years I've been doing this, I'll bet you I've traveled over 400 or 500 million miles. 4 or 5 million miles, at least.
I don't doubt that a bit.
I just came back. I just came back from Kentucky.
Yeah,
I left Wednesday morning. Drove down to Kentucky. J.R. Gray's and bred one of my Grand Nite females out of bone. So I got a Grand Nite female head out of bone and world champion Lila.
Okay, yeah.
And I just bred her to J.R. Gray's, but I'll be honest with you, I drove down there.
Did you breed to Willie or to?
Yeah,
he's not breeding the Connor dog yet, I don't think, is he?
No, and I think I like the looks of that dog. That's a good looking dog. I really did. He's a nice square built dog. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bred the Willie, and but you saying that, and I have a big Duramax diesel. Me, I got about 6 different trucks, but I run that little Toyota all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it cost me $750 in gas to go from Connecticut to Kentucky and back.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to book a bear hunt for this fall up in Maine. My buddy Nubbin Moore has never killed a bear over hounds, so we're trying to get something together and talking to the outfitter and the guide and all, just talking about the cost of gas. He figures, at least $600 for a week is what he's going to have to spend.
Well, if you guys
gasoline.
if you travel up here, you're going to be coming up 95.
All right.
To go to Maine, I'm sure.
Yeah.
If you do, you better call my mom and dad and me because we're only 15 miles off 95.
Well, maybe we can stop by for a cup of coffee or something.
We'll at least take you to dinner or some breakfast or whatever.
That'd be great.
We'd love to.
It'd be great to see all of you for sure. Duke, out of all those years, all those miles, any favorite memories or special hounds you've hunted with or that you remember most, or any favorite stories you could share?
Well, I'll be honest, and this sticks in my head. In 1988, I went to Autumn Oaks, and I believe that year was in Ohio. I think it was in Oak Harbor.
Oak Harbor, probably. Yeah.
And I was young, and I had that old Grand Nite dog. And anyways, I hunted Friday night. My cast and had no big score. On Saturday night, somebody from UKC asked me if there's any way I'd judge a cast. So I did. I judged a Grand Nite cast, and I had Gary Davis Night Heat, and I had one of Bart Nation's dogs, Blue Chubbs.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember if it was a walking dog out of Kentucky. And I drew Charlie Butler, or I judged Charlie Butler, Buck Creek Racing.
Right.
And And I still remember this. She was the only dog I ever hunted with in a cast like that. We treated in the ground a couple times, and she treated, I think, 3 coons in a den. But the dog had first and first on every drop. Most impressive thing I've ever seen in a hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I never hunted with a dog, even to this day, that every drop the dog had first and first.
Amazing. Yeah, Gracie was the dog that Charlie had stolen and was.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that story. I
Yeah.
ran into him at Autumn Oaks a few years back, in chat with him and talking with him. But yeah, that was the most impressive dog on one night I'd ever seen go with her. And I've seen some, over the years, you can't remember them. Of course, you've seen some awesome dogs go, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But she,
Sure.
as a young fella stepping into the competition world in '88, I still remember her to this day.
Well, when they make an impression on you like that, you don't forget it. That's for sure. Of
Yep.
your personal dogs, which has been your personal favorite down through the years?
Well,
Duke?
I can honestly say, Tom brought me into the competition world, made me who I am, or whatever you want to call it. Made me, here's a kid out of Connecticut, won a world title hunting against Russ Beller, some of the greatest guys in the coon dog history. He made me. And nowhere made me in PKC.
Right. Yeah.
And as far as a breeder, I'm no breeder. I've been very successful, picking what I breed to, but I wouldn't call myself a breeder. But I'd say out of all the dogs I've owned and always hunted, Chili is my favorite.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there'll
Just
always be
because-
that one that stands out, and
he was a pet.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would, if somebody would come on my house and he was in the house, if they would go in my daughter's room, my daughter at the time was 3 or 4 years old. I mean, he would watch him. I mean, he'd almost growl at him. And he would never show aggression ever. And
Right.
one night my daughter was asleep and he'd lay in front of her bed when she slept at night, every night. That's where he lay. Well, me and my wife was joking around the house or something. And I kind of picked her up and just threw her on the couch playing. She's got laughed and screamed. Well, he'd come out of that bedroom. He was going to eat me alive. I mean, you should have seen him. And so then
Yeah.
I felt kind of good because at the time I wasn't hunting as much anymore. And I just knew that my wife, my daughter was safe in his house with him.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, I would encourage anybody that can. I don't advocate that you bring a kennel full of dogs and turn them loose in your house and let them roam at will.
Right.
But if you can, you've got that dog that he's going to adapt to that sort of thing and you really like him. If you start living with that dog, you'll find out so much about dogs that you never really knew. Do you agree with that?
Well, I can tell you, yes. And I can tell you something else. Everybody knows through the years, I've been known for big, wide hunting independent dogs. You draw me in a hunt, I'll almost promise you my dog's never going to trigger a dog. And they're bred that way. I don't beat them. I don't shock them. They're bred that way. I mean, that's just the way they're bred. But my dogs were hard to handle. They were hard to get your hands on.
Yeah.
Just because they were so wide.
Mm-hmm.
In Chile, when he was young, Steve, you couldn't catch him with a shrimp net. I ain't lying to you. You couldn't catch him. I mean, you couldn't shock him to come in. He'd outrun that collar.
Yeah.
But when I got to handle him, when he got hit, I don't care where he was, I could call him in.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've noticed is at the time you spend with some of these dogs now, these dogs aren't like they were 30 years ago.
No.
The intelligence of the dogs today, and I'm not picking on nobody, but some of these dogs are smarter than the people that hunt.
True.
Including myself at moments. I'll be honest, I'm guilty of it. But like I have a female now. I'm partners with a fellow, 2 fellows, and I sold her as a puppy at Autumn Oaks. I raised her. I raised the litter and sold her as a pup. Well, about 11 months later, I bought her back from this young fella, and he got her running train. And again, she was one of them ones that is already running train, and I can do my thing with her. And again, you couldn't catch her.
Mm-hmm.
But as I spent time with her and kept her around me, I don't care where she is now. I can call her in. I
Yeah.
don't care what she's doing. I can call her.
Yeah. Oh,
And I
it
think that
definitely reflects on how they listen and all.
she's
You
another
know.
one I can turn her loose here in the yard. She's in the kennel. She's the one that has puppies right now. She
Right.
comes in the house, wanders around, says hi to everybody. She'll jump on the bed with my daughter, go back out to her kennel. Just she's like having a yard dog.
So now is this female that has the puppies now the ones out of no, you said you just bred a female to
But I also
to
bred
Willie.
Willie twice.
Oh, okay. So these puppies are out of Willie too.
Correct. Yep.
So you
Yep.
have some of those available?
I don't know. She had 7 and lost 2 right when they were born.
I see.
So I have 5. I have 5 right now, and I'm actually partners. The short story is, I went to work for the government for a while.
You're from the government, and you're here to help me, right?
Well, I went down to D.C. to work like construction, construction management,
right,
on government jobs. Basically, I was working on like Navy bases and that type of stuff. I didn't hands-on work. I was doing estimating.
Sure.
Well, long story short, I decided to sell this female. I call her Jewel. Right after the spring, she was in a 1-year-old Super Stakes, and I won 3 rounds, and I ended up selling her because I knew I couldn't hunt for a while. And that's the only time in my life I didn't hunt for about 6, 8 months, just because of my work. I was traveling a bunch and just
sure.
It was one of those things, So I sold it to a gentleman who I'd known for years. I'd never met him personally, but I talked to him on the phone and known of him, Jack Maggard in London, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
So Jack's boy came up to Ohio, Jamie, and tried her, and he bought her. Well, then I realized after about 6 months, they'd moved my work to home. Well, I could hunt. I couldn't really go to many hunts, but I could hunt.
Yeah.
So I went on a search. My partner there, Tom Gilbert, we went on a search looking for dogs, and I couldn't find nothing I liked. So Jack, lucky to me, Jack sold half her back to us, and now I've had her now for 2.5, 3 years.
I got you. Well, where am I going to run into you again? Is it going to be Autumn Oaks, maybe?
I'm going to try, just because I always enjoy visit with everybody. It all depends, Steve. Of course, in today's world, it all depends on my workload,
sure.
family obligations, horse shows.
Well, Duke, I don't usually get political on this podcast, and I'm not going to now in terms of naming names or anything like that. But I just think the way I look at this thing, the way things are going in our country right now with these gas prices and the inflation and everything else, is this is all prohibiting Americans like you and me, and especially hunters like you and me, that love a sport that requires us to move around the country somewhat if we really want to enjoy it and see our friends that we've made over all the years and so forth. It's greatly crimping my life, my pursuit of happiness, so to speak. And I don't like that. That makes me mad. I think we need to do something about that, because we as Americans are being mistreated right now. And somebody needs to get a grip on it. And I'm not sure who that is or when it will be, but I just know that I love, all the years that I traveled, I was on the registry's dime while you guys were out there pumping gas. I was on an expense account. So I'm grateful for that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to brag about that. But now I'm not. As Jimmy Phillips, my longtime friend, says, I'm on a fixed income. So, anything that hampers my ability to get around the country and see my friends, and especially go hunting, is not a good thing. And it makes me a little mad to think about it.
Well, my input on part of this is a reason I bred this Jewel dog when I bred her. I was watching gas prices climb. She came into heat. I told Jack and Tom both, I said, listen, this is the time to breed her. We've never bred her. She was 4 years old. I said, it's time to breed her now. I said, we're not going to be running up and down the road to go to these hunts with gas being, at that time, $4, $4, $5, $6, $7 a gallon. I said, it's ridiculous.
Right.
I said, so let's get her bred now, raise a litter, So that was kind of the input. Of course, Jack, is fortunate he has real two good dogs on a Willie, and so we thought about going to Willie. I said, hey, listen, that's great. I should have bred a female to him earlier. It just didn't happen, you know. Well, we get back to these gas prices, and I'll be honest with you, Steve. I'm fortunate. I have two partners that split the expenses with. I have a good situation, but I am not going to take that kind of money every week or every month out of my family's mouth. I can afford it. I make good money. I have a good job. I've been self-employed for 27, 28 years, but I just don't think it's fair to take $700,000, $800,000 out of my family's mouth to go to a coon hunt.
Well, that's true. And I think a lot of guys have made a mistake over the years when they didn't get their priorities straight.
And I'm not knocking nobody that does it.
I'm not either. And I just started to say those that are economically endowed, so to speak, with good finances, and they can do that, and they can, and it doesn't affect them. I'm glad for them. I really am. But I don't know what the average guy's going to do. Will it be increased participation at the local events? I think we've kind of swung the pendulum toward the bigger events where the bigger purses and the more publicity.
I think you'll see some of in coon hunting areas, not here, but in coon hunting areas, I think you'll see some of the smaller events picking up during the week.
Yeah,
guys, you can go over here and spend a tank of gas, but somebody's got to spend $400 or $500 on gas to get to a hunting home. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And I don't care what you drive for a vehicle. I mean, none of them you're not getting anything gets over 18, 20 miles a gallon.
Exactly.
And that's, our horse industry is taking a beating on this gas.
Oh, I bet.
But in politics wise, I'm like you. I don't really get into it. I know what the problem is, and I'm not a highly educated man, but it doesn't take one to figure it out. But they kept us home. It seems like our government, our administration wants to keep us home.
Mm-hmm.
We went from COVID to this to that. It's just like it's like a blanket holding us down.
Yeah. Well, I often said over the years, and I mentioned that I worked with legal matters at UKC and at PKC as well. Now, AKC had a special department that handled all that stuff, but I learned early on that the animal rights movement is not about animals. It's about controlling the people who have animals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's what we're dealing with here. Well, hopefully things will get better. The pump prices will go down. Truck prices. Oh my gosh. I'm driving a 2010 F-150 that I bought when I retired, and I'm still driving it because I get sticker shock when I look at the prices.
Steve, you laugh, but I have a 2020, 1-ton Denali diesel. It sits here in my yard. I drive everywhere because I love the thing, and I've been thinking about buying a new one. But I drive an 09 Toyota Tacoma.
Yeah,
it has 375,000 miles on it.
They're great trucks. I had a couple of them myself. I was
driving to Florida to visit you tomorrow. I wouldn't even think twice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Well, Duke, it's been a great visit with you. I always enjoy visiting with you and at the events, and I always appreciate you coming up and shaking my hand. And I knew you back when you were running hard and you were intense and you were focused, and you weren't always the easiest guy to deal with. But you were focused. You were, and I never had to bar you for anything. And I always enjoyed your friendship. And it's good to be able to sit down like this and talk to you again. And there's so many guys out there that need, if they haven't met you, they need to. Guys out there in the listening audience, you see this big burly guy, still got his hair, talks with a Yankee accent. Go up and say hello to him. you'll enjoy the experience. Duke, I want you to come back on a little later on down the road, and we'll talk some more about your adventures, because I know we really haven't even touched the surface on all the stories that you could tell us. But I sure am happy that you came on the podcast with me. Is there anything that we were going to touch on that we didn't, or that you'd like to say before we go?
No, Steve, it's been a great, it's always a pleasure talking to you. You know that. And it is nice to, yes, you're right. I have a look that people don't approach me. I don't know what it is. My wife said I'm intimidating looking. Okay. You've known me since I was 14.
Yeah.
I'm the most, I will help anybody.
I know
do
that's
anything.
true. I know that's true.
But people need to understand that in this coon dog world, in any world, like again, bass fishing, horses, race cars, it took me until I had a child, and maybe 5 years into having my daughter, that I realized that my biggest fans were my mom and dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I know they are extremely proud of you. I've spoken to them many times at the events. And it's ironic that we're recording this on the day before Father's Day. And we'll give a belated shout out, because this won't be coming out until, actually a week from Monday. The cast will air on June 27th. But,
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, but we'll give a shout out. Yeah.
And the people listening to this podcast, which I don't know who listens to them, but I'll tell you, there's one thing I'd like everybody to understand in this world of coon hunting. We hear so many stories about this one and that one and this one. But people, and I realize it now as I get older, I watch these younger fellows, the Dustin Weeds, the Mike Awards, all these younger fellows that really, have come to the limelight. They came to the top. They rose. People need to understand that these people have sacrificed so much of their life to get there.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yes, and I'm proud to know that these. I always told them I'm 10 years behind in life because of coon hunting. Because I devoted them 8 years just being on the road. But without that, I wouldn't have your friendship and all the friendships I've made all over the countryside.
Absolutely true. Yep. If it hadn't been for, yeah, go ahead.
My wife broke down just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, with a truck and trailer. I'm here working because, you feel like your family's broke down. You feel hopeless.
Oh, yeah.
You know who went and got my wife off the side of the road? Amy and Bill Kovacs.
Yeah.
Here we are, in the coon hunt world. I put something on across Facebook, and Amy and Bill go get my wife off the road. So them are the kind of friendships you develop just through this. When you say, "Oh, I missed 10 years of my life," but then again, here's a person that you met through coon hunting that went and helped your family.
Yeah, I had Amy on the podcast not long ago, and she and Billy Thomas, have been great friends, and their kids and all. But I remember following that scenario on Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah, it's such a big family, and it's often been said that when someone's in trouble, coon hunters always come to the front.
Yeah,
they may be hard to deal with out there in the 2-hour contest sometimes, but when the chips are down and you really need somebody, call a fellow coon hunter. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure. If I can ever do anything for you in a further, if you want bear hunt, whatever, please contact us. Let us know, and hopefully we'll see you at Automotives.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Duke, and if not then, maybe at Grand American in January. But you stay safe out there on the highways. Don't let the heat get to you, and good luck with those puppies. And if somebody maybe is interested in a pup, how could they get in touch with you?
Right off Facebook, probably easiest.
And it's Larry Duke
Proulx.
Prue. Proulx. That's it, folks. that's our episode for this week. Thanks to Duke Proulx for coming on and being our guest. We'll close this one out just like I do every week by saying, if somebody asks you where I am, just tell them he's gone to the dogs.